So, Jewish renewal, as many of you know, um, is kind of a neo-Hasidic denomination. It's not a denomination; it's a movement. Reb Zalman always warned us about denominations that kind of they get frozen. So even the Hasidic movement, as revolutionary and innovative as it was, the moment it became sort of denominational, it kind of froze up. So anyway, we're neo-Hasidic, and what does that mean? Well, kind of one of the elements of it is, divinity is everywhere. God is everywhere. There's not a separation between God and nature. This whole idea of Ein Od Milvado, there's nothing but God. It's all God. It's this panentheism, you might say. And so I'm going to open up with a little song that many of you know, I could tell from who's here, from the Chernobyl Rebbe, who in Chernobyl, one time was a great center of Hasidic learning. Today, we just think of it as a place of a terrible nuclear reactor disaster. But it was really a great center. I think it was 50 or 60% Hasidic, or Jewish at least, in that city. And the Chernobyl, the Rebbe was having the same kind of issues that contemporary rabbis do in the United States anyway, which is secularism. People said, I'm fed up with this mysticism. This mystical supernatural parts of God, and I don't believe in God. And the Chernobyl taught, that life force that's inside of you. Who do you think that is? What do you think that is? That's God. And so let me put the screen share on, and many of you know it. I wish you could sing with me out loud, but it just doesn't work in this generation of Zoom. But please join me, even though you're muted. La 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 da 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 da. I am alive. Da 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 da. I am alive. Da 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 da. I am alive. I'm alive. And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? Is it not the Holy Blessed One? Da 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 da. Chai ani. Da 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 da. Chai ani. Da 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 da. Hello. Chai ani. Chai ani. Umihu hachayut sheli. Umihu hachayut sheli. Umihu hachayut sheli. Lo borei itbara. Just that last phrase in English. Is it not the Holy Blessed One? 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 So, Rabbanu Shalom, we dedicate our learning today to peace, to wholeness for each of us individually, shleimut, and peace for the whole world.
I'll read it.
Thanks, Ayala.
Then Abraham ran to the herd, took a calf, tender and choice, and gave it to a servant boy who hastened to prepare it. He took curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them, and he waited on them under the trees as they ate.
Okay. What do we notice here? What seems peculiar in these verses? Especially in the context of Abraham was so special, the Torah tells us, and the sages many times tell us, Abraham's so special. He followed all the mitzvot. Anyone notice something peculiar in this account, though?
Oh, sure. It's a calf and milk. He's mixing milk and meat.
He's mixing milk and meat. So here we have this is an episode where Abraham had some guests come visit his tent, and he gave a calf to a servant boy, and the servant boy came and they served from Abraham's house milk and meat. So before we go any further, what do we think about this? So Abraham's so special. He kept all the mitzvot, even though they hadn't been given yet. And also we have this thing where he's literally eating milk and meat. But the Torah, is the Torah contradicting itself? Or what's going on here? What do you all think?
Maybe the mitzvah of hospitality trumped the mitzvah of kosher.
Could be.
Seems like the Torah contradicts itself a lot, so it doesn't seem unusual to me.
For sure. Other thoughts?
It fits in for me with Jewish renewal, because some of us drive to shul these days. Mm-hmm. We're not clinging to the letter of the law. We're trying to go into maybe what the purpose of this mitzvah might be, mm-hmm. and then to live according to that and find a way to outpicture it that meets our world, our heart, our culture, our society, our beloveds.
I love that.
What if they just forgot the word goat before milk? So maybe it was goat's milk, not cow's milk. So,
which the rabbis who defined Jewish law would say is also not kosher. But I'm a rabbi who says eat what nourishes your body. What else? Other thoughts? We're going to dive into like the meat of this teaching from that the Degel Machane Ephraim gives us in the name of his grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov. But what are our thoughts? Go ahead, Fran.
Well, there are some teachings that I've read in quite a few places that this may be a time when the Messiah is coming. And when the Messiah comes, we will have changed, which brings our awareness of the Messiah. And at that time, we will not have to follow the ritual rules that we did before. So this might suggest that Abraham was again special and beyond having to, I've lost the word, follow the rules that were in the Torah that wasn't written then.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's get back to our Hasidic text. That I think we're going to get some sources for something similar to what we just heard. So I think it was Fran was just sharing. Will you read this next paragraph that I highlighted for us that starts our sages?
Our sages have said Nida 61b.
So this is a Talmudic source.
Yeah, that in the future the commandments will be annulled. I heard from my grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, in his name or in the name of Rambam, that the world will eventually achieve such a deep understanding of the fractalization of each mitzvah, the root of the vitality inherent in each mitzvah, and how this is literally the life force of the soul and of all the worlds.
There's a lot there. What was shared with our group before was someone had seen it actually shows up in multiple places in Talmud. If anyone is interested, I can share it. The source sheet we were just looking at has lots of sources connected to this text. But Nida is a Masechet of Talmud. It also is mentioned in Masachet Kiddushin, and likely other places. This idea that in the future, in Ha'olam Haba, the world to come, all of the mitzvot will be nullified, meaning it doesn't matter. So that's really weird, because here we are living in this time between Abraham's time, where we're told he was able to follow all the mitzvot, even though they weren't given. Here we have all these commandments, statutes, and laws, and we're struggling. But somehow, sometime in the future, which if it's Olam Haba, it's the time when we all have really figured it out, the mitzvot will actually be nullified. So that's really interesting. And he tells us this is my translation, but what I called vitality. So like in the future, this Hasidic teaching is that in the future, the way this makes sense, everyone is going to understand so deeply Bechinat mitzvah, Bechinat mitzvah, which is, I translated Bechina, which usually means aspect. I translate it as like fractalization. It's like we're going to understand this aspect of mitzvah, which really I picked fractalization because it's like we're going to understand it so deeply, so intricately, that we're going to understand Shoresh Chayot HaMitzvah. So the root of the Chayot, what we just were singing it, this aliveness that I am, or this vitality, but it's not just vitality, it's the vitality of the mitzvah. And also, not just Chayut HaMitzvah, but also Chayut Nafsho v'Chayut Kol HaOlamot. So the vitality, the life force of the soul of the world, and also the vitality, the life force of all the worlds. So there's so much being said here. And I'm curious, I do want to read through, but this is sort of like the heart of this teaching. What thoughts does anyone have that you want to share so far?
I had the thought of, I guess this is sort of simplifying it for everyday life, but as you're reading this, I love the word fractalization. I love that you chose that. I think that's a great word. And because it goes with what science has discovered as well. But after reading that, I thought, it's talking about being kind, that somehow we have to learn in our souls and our hearts and our bodies and our whole beings. Not just the idea of being kind and how to feel to be kind, but how to actually be kind, live kindness. It's not simple. So, yeah.
Yeah. That there's something beneath the mitzvah. There's this chayot that's like this life force that might have to do with kindness. But whatever it is, it's the life force behind it.
It's also pointing to a going beyond our sense of duality. Which, when you said that made absolute sense in terms of what the next step is and what people have to realize, which has to do with kindness, because then kindness comes unless we decide to treat ourselves badly.
Interesting.
I think it also implies that we have it within us already, that it's inherent, in the ruach that comes in through our breath. It's already there. We just get in the way. How do we learn to stop getting in the way, in a sense?
So to save time, I'm going to read through this next chunk that gives us I'm going to read through the next chunk we'll do some reflecting, and then there's one more chunk after. So the Degel, in the name of his grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, goes on and tells us, this is the meaning of the verse. If my covenant is not upheld day and night, then the laws of heaven and earth I have not established. That's from the book of Jeremiah. So if my covenant is not upheld day and night, then the laws of heaven and earth I have not established. My covenant refers to the Torah. And as Abraham apprehended the entire Torah by himself, not as a commandment, because the Torah had not yet been given, but rather he inherently understood how the life force, the chayut of each mitzvah, is the very vitality, the chayut of the soul, and he knew that he needed to fulfill them in order to cling to the life of all lives.
So along that same line, I was thinking that actually Abraham was embodying the understanding and the mentality that we would have if the Mashiach were to come, right? What's the Mashiach? This, complete radical change in how we see the world. He was already there before it had to be given, before any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on the similar vein, Ayala, when I was looking at all the verses we read, what my feeling is that he was so connected, like you said, embodied, but he was so connected with the divine and with earth and with some truth that he innately knew. Like he was connected to his heart, his soul, his gut. He just knew something innately.
Mm-hmm. He was attuned, yeah.
Very attuned and very aligned with all of it without even knowing, but he knew because it was truth. It was truth to him, right?
Yeah.
It was the truth.
I had a similar thought of, I mean, I know I have. I imagine most people have had the experience of doing a mitzvah, being kind, moving beyond, one's own personal dislikes, gripes, stubbornness, procrastination, whatever it is, in order to reach out to another soul or to another being and to just be present with that other life force, bringing one's own life force to that other life force and being present. And that to me brings a very profound feeling of that vitality of soul and that connection to God and to the oneness of all that is. So this sounds like, as someone else was saying, like Abraham had that he was this very special soul, perhaps, who was able to stay connected in that way. And perhaps that is, as Rabbi David said, a vision for us of what we can become.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I had a joke. I'll refrain. I wanna come and read this last chunk. I apologize if there is anyone following along with the Hebrew that it got a little sectioned off, but we start in the Hebrew ve'az and in the English here, and then in the future. Is there someone who wants to unmute and just read these last two sections in the English for us?
And then in the future, it will be as the verse says, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God as the sea is covered with water, from Isaiah. For then everything will be out there in the open, and everyone will understand deeply the ways of life like our father Abraham. May he rest in peace. The root of every mitzvah and its inner secrets, how they illuminate and enliven humanity in all the worlds.
Okay, thank you. So we have a few more minutes to sit with this, but thoughts, reflections, maybe questions. Remember, in our tradition, questions are better than answers.
By being hospitable and treating others as he'd like to be treated, he was fulfilling all the commandments. The rest is commentary, so they say.
Thank you.
Maybe we're not really meant to know fully while we're still here, but the grappling with the contradictions is definitely a reflection of what human life is like, and perhaps the grappling with the questions and the contradictions is meant to keep us aware of our souls and aware of our growth, and perhaps give us a bit of a lighthouse beacon calling us forward and upward on our journey. Maybe.
The best. He's the best. Really cool. And really grateful that he gave his teachings, and that his grandson decided to write this one down, so that we could study it and reflect, and may we all be blessed to continue to reflect. John Dewey described the word reflection as like taking something into ourselves and turning it around. So may you turn this around and many times over, and may it nourish you in your journey and your path. And I was told to keep it to 40 minutes, and that we do something else now.
I just have one question. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, before we move on. This just came to me, that what does this teaching say to us about keeping the mitzvot? Because we are not Avraham, who was clearly, in another realm of being. So, in a sense, it's telling me, like, what gives us the right to pick and choose which mitzvot are serving us, serving God, and which ones aren't. I'm not asking you to answer it. I'm just saying this is just what came up for me. It's like, yeah.
Right.
'Cause
Right.
it says every mitzvah has its chayut, right? The life force, everyone.
Yeah. And there's also, so I think when you're saying picking and choosing, we're talking about, right? I think actually, like, even people who are like within the system of classical halacha, someone who has an orthodox practice, is picking and choosing which interpretations they are following on how to live Torah, how to interpret the mitzvot of the Torah, what it is we are supposed to do, how we are supposed to behave based on the words of the Torah. All of us are choosing how we interpret that. Some with much deeper, like direct knowledge, have like studied these words over and over. But we're not in Ha'olam Haba yet. We're not in the world to come. These mitzvot are not yet nullified. And actually, like, all of us are in our process of picking and choosing, are somehow, I think, like, the fact that we're not in Ha'olam Haba yet is somehow like indicative of the fact that we're not actually understanding the depth, the core, the fractalization of the life force beneath each mitzvah. And I don't know that Avraham was picking and choosing when he decided to cook, to serve milk and meat on the same platter together to his guests. I don't know that he was saying, I don't really, I'm gonna assess that we don't need to do this. It actually wasn't a thing yet, but there was still something that's a hint to us that whatever that depth, that life force, that aliveness at the core, at the root of the mitzvot, is something other than what we've been thinking. There's something else. I don't know what it is, and I don't know if it's for us to understand, but more for us to embody. But I don't know. I'm curious. Even though acknowledging it's not necessarily something for us to understand, we can't drosh it out and be like, "Oh, we got it." I mean, maybe we can. We could cock-a-doodle-doo in a synagogue, and it might tip the scale toward Moshiach. But I don't know. Are there any other thoughts or?
I do. I always do. As Rabbi David knows, I always do. I just what I suddenly came into my mind was that God's tents are always open. That God doesn't have, walls on the tent, and He doesn't say, "Well, because Abraham mixed meat and milk once, then that nullifies my saying, that He always kept all my commandments." It doesn't do that, because God's much more inclusive than that. And so, and the same with how people interpret. I loved what you said about, no matter how someone's interpreting, they're still interpreting, and that the tent has to stay open. And that, it makes me think of all the work that Israelis do for Palestinians. The tent has to stay open, and that's a way of keeping the tent open. And so, that was just popped into my mind. Like, God's tent's never closed to anyone.
Rabbi Rachel, I'm sure you know, so Reb Zalman came up with this term, integral halakha. At first he called it psycho-halakha. And it's an interesting little background to that. Mordechai Kaplan, Oliver Shalom, this genius who started the Reconstructionist movement, said that as we're deciding talking about the mitzvot, the Torah gets a vote, but it doesn't get a veto. Now that's kind of a linear way of looking at it, where Reb Zalman's way, the more Hasidic way, is that integral halakha means that, yes, we have to keep all the mitzvot, right? We are keeping the mitzvot because it's all at its root. We're just trying to figure out how is it interacting for me? How is it right for me? So integral halakha means you don't get rid of the mitzvot. You find a way to dialogue with them, to be part of each of them, even the ones because everybody's got mitzvot that are easy for them to do, and the ones that are easy for me are hard for you, etc. So I think I want to look at it more holistically, more mystically, before and after, that we are doing the mitzvot.
Yeah.
And now we're just dialoguing.
And I think, thanks for saying that there's an important context to this teaching, is that it's not saying, so throw out all the mitzvot. They were living in a social context where they were practicing in a very orthodox way, and from that context, we're exploring. So what is this really? I don't really understand what I'm doing when I have a friend who is sort of like, he defines himself, he's neo-Hasidic, and he defines himself as like liberal Orthodox, and he just moved to Boulder, Colorado, where there's no Eruv, and his wife just had a baby, and Eruv is like a string that's hung around an entire city, which makes it a private domain, and you can carry within a private domain, but you're not allowed on Shabbat. You're prohibited from carrying outside of a private domain. They just had a baby, and so he was saying, like, we're gonna go out on Shabbat. I'm gonna carry my baby outside on Shabbat. I wish I didn't have to. And he's not saying he wished he didn't have to carry his baby. He's saying he wished he didn't have to do it without an eruv. So there's sort of like as they're, to him, like he's in the process of discerning, like it's more important to me to go be with community on Shabbat and be with my baby and like have my baby be part of my communal life. But there's this law, like it's not, I think that they're in that context where they're so deep in it that there are rules and laws that maybe don't make sense. And they're like, okay, like, how can I understand at the core this thing that maybe doesn't actually make sense? Like, do we think that the Torah wanted someone to not carry their baby when they go out on Shabbat? No. Do we think the rabbis wanted that when they wrote the laws that worked with that? No. But so I think it's like this teaching, it's important to contextualize it, that they were living deep within the halachic system.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's also like, it's sort of what Rabbi Sarah Leah Mazel Tov asked yesterday, how do you kasher a microwave? We're dealing with technologies that were unimaginable, right, 200 years ago, let alone in Abraham's time. And yet supernaturally, Abraham saw the whole thing. Moshe saw the whole thing. They saw the whole big picture. That even the way we deal with cell phones and microwave ovens and how we talk about halakha, and we're dialoguing with it. We're interacting with it. Yeah, I want you to meet Mata Esther. Have you met Mata Esther?
Hi.
She's in Jerusalem.
I think you're a different generation.
You're At Yerushalayim?
Yeah.
Where do you live?
I live in Nachlaot.
Okay, I live in Baca.
So you live there or you lived there?
I live there currently.
Wow.
I'm not sure how much longer, but I currently live there. I'll be back in a week and a half.
Okay. Okay. Wow. That's
Well,
amazing. I didn't know you were from Israel.
I want you two to hook up sometime and meet each other more. And I want to take the next 10 minutes really for people just to do what we're doing now. Is this, if you have any questions for Rabbi Rachel, personal questions or rabbinical questions. So Mata Esther, Rabbi Rachel Dorit has applied to be the rabbi here. So I'm retiring this year, and I know you're.
I keep it. I know exactly what's going on.
Okay. I don't know it. I only say it so I can remember.
No, only as much as you communicate, I should say.
Okay,
you and I a lot.
Anybody have any questions on any level that you'd like to ask her? We want, this is really for all of our members, Rabbi Rachel Dorit. It's not going to be me or the council that are going to hire you. It's really the community has to really, send us little notes. Send Ayala or the council or myself that, this is going to work. So I want everybody to have a chance to meet you and ask questions. Thank you, Nancy Snyder, for your beautiful note that you wrote me the other day. I really appreciated it. It's great. Anybody have any comments or questions for her?
When are you retiring? What month?
The month after Rabbi Rachel gets here.
Oh, okay.
So, no, seriously, I was hoping to retire after this high holidays. And I'm going to stay as long as necessary. So I'm assuming I'll continue to be rabbi through our fiscal year, which is the end of June. And I'm assuming the next rabbi is going to step in early July, but it may be even before that. And I'm going to hang around. I'm going to hopefully be an active member and as a mentor to whoever comes in to get the next rabbi really familiar with our beautiful community.
Rabbi Rachel, how do you feel about leaving Israel?
Oh, that's a big question. I'm going to say, how do I feel? I feel a lot. I feel a lot.
Where did you go to rabbinic school?
I went to Aleph, the Alliance for Jewish Renewal.
In Philadelphia?
There is an office in Philadelphia that processed my tuition and class registration, though I never went there. It's a low residency program, so we have fall and spring semester courses online, and also in-person intensives, depending on what classes you're in, 2 to 5 times a year. And also, there's learning that there's flexibility for us to do learning in other institutions. So I also, for 3 years during my rabbinical school journey, was also learning full-time at the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies in Jerusalem. And I was also a rabbinic intern there.
Can I ask you to just look, I'm sorry, to just go a little bit further with Mata Esther's question? Nothing personal, okay? But, that's a big thing she asked you, how do you feel about, leaving Israel, especially post-October 7th? So if you want to just share just a little bit more, and don't be too personal if you don't want to be. But, I know she and others would appreciate hearing just a little bit about what it was like being there on October 7th, and let alone what you've gone through afterwards.
I'm just going
And
to
if I'm
take
putting
it
you in
in.
the spot, then don't you can ignore it right now. So
So over the last 4 years, Jerusalem has been home. I have a home that really feels like a home, with a garden filled with fruit trees, pomegranates, citrus. I've got 2 kinds of palm. I have 2 kinds of berry trees, and I really love it. And my soul feels alive there in ways I had not experienced anywhere else. And this past year has been the most intense of my life. A year ago, I started a role co-leading a shul in the center of Jerusalem, the Fuchsberg Center, which is a center for conservative Judaism in Jerusalem. And so we had like a high holiday season, and on that campus, Mata Esther, you might know, there's a hostel on the Fuchsberg campus. And on October 8th, that hostel was filled with evacuees from the south, some from the north, most from the south, some who had been in communities that had been infiltrated. And so October 8th, our shul was home to all of these people. We were all undergoing active trauma. If you were there on October 7th, also in Jerusalem from 8:15 a.m. until 2:45 p.m., there were nonstop missiles, so sounds of explosions and sounds of sirens. So we were all very actively experiencing that. Frequent missile attacks continued in Jerusalem for the next few weeks. And then there would be just here and there, other than the direct attack from Iran in April. It's been mostly quiet in Jerusalem. But I also on October 10th started a course in clinical pastoral education. So I was a student chaplain at Ichilov Hospital in Tel Aviv, where I started on October 10th. So I was serving in a hospital unit, internal medicine unit, that the entire unit had been moved to the -4th floor of the parking garage. So if you can imagine a big hospital in a big city, in a parking garage, bright lights, tons of beds, all the respirators, a chair next to every bed for friends and family to sit with them, but no walls, no privacy. There's like a nurse's station on the ramp because you're in a parking garage. And my very first shift, I sat bedside with a woman who had survived Auschwitz, 4 stories underground. And on that day, there was an air raid where we were. So we heard the sirens while we were there underground having this experience. And so I spent the last year living through the experience of being Israeli. I feel like on October 7th, I became Israeli, even though before that, I had kind of come to terms with the fact that no matter how long I live there, even if it's for the rest of my life, I will not be Israeli. for better and for worse, I am now. And I spent the last year being in a position in multiple locations. I also was a student chaplain at a hospital in Jerusalem called the French Hospital. I was in positions where I was doing like triage spiritual care. And then taking every moment I had when I was not doing that to just like cook good meals and get rest. And you know, throughout the spring, I spent a lot of time in Haifa, so I had a lot of time on the sea. And I think I'm going to be processing and unpacking all of that for the rest of my life, whether I'm here or there or anywhere else that my life takes me. And there's, you know, I could have left at any point during the last year, but my intuition told me time and time again to stay, to finish what I started primarily with the clinical pastoral education. The Fuchsberg, where I was working at the Shul, where we were doing like drop-in activities for all of the families that were staying on our campus. That organization depends on tour groups for revenue. And so by December, many of us no longer had jobs because 100% of the tour groups had canceled, not wanting to come during such a circumstance. And I had a good friend who I go to shul with there, this guy Nir, right after I was let go from that job. And I'm feeling like I'm alone, I'm in this country, this bad thing happened to me. And he was like, "Oh, Rachel, you're like all of us. We all lost our job. You are really Israeli." Like, okay. And I just, I felt like I didn't want to leave everyone. There are so many people there who cannot leave, have nowhere else to go. And that's like Israelis and Palestinian friends and colleagues as well. I have close relationships with people in a couple of communities in Area C of the West Bank, Palestinian villages, and they're going through it too. And I felt like I don't know what I can do, but I feel like I can, you know, like I didn't want to leave. And now I do have a bit of an inner voice that's saying there's something for me to do that is here and not there. And it's a big life transition, you know, like most of my years in Jerusalem were studying, and were the years of my formal formation as a rabbi. And then there's this last year that was something like an initiation. And so I think like I'm sort of between worlds in the transition. I feel like that transition is happening. And Jerusalem is home, whether I continue living there or not. But I do still have like a literal home apartment with things to tend to before I could make a significant physical move. Hopefully that says a bit more. Divalti.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shmati.